we embrace the double. We think it's great. We want to see other drivers, have that opportunity. Indy is a big race. Obviously, the Coke 600 is a huge race for us. To not have Kyle Larson in our playoff and give our fans the opportunity to see him race for a championship and compete against some of the best drivers in the world. At the end of the day, didn't feel like that's the right decision for us to make, and we didn't. We felt like we got to the right spot.
NASCAR has granted Kyle Larson a playoff waiver after he missed the start of the Coca-Cola 600 because he was competing in the rain-delayed Indianapolis 500 last month. I'm joined by NBC sports analyst Jeff Burton. And Jeff, NASCAR Senior Vice President of Competition Elton Sawyer talked to us earlier today in the media and said how there were a lot of discussions internally and how this was an unprecedented situation. I guess first off, did NASCAR get it right in granting Kyle Larson a playoff waiver for missing a race that they had said was their priority the whole time they were doing the double?
Dustin, I think at the end of the day, I think that NASCAR got it right for the fans. I mean, I think our fan base wants to see Kyle Larson in the playoffs. I think the fans lose if he's not in the playoffs. He is certainly, I've stated publicly, he's the best driver in the world. He's exceptionally competitive, obviously, in the Cup Series. And, a lot of people are going to come and watch him race for a championship. So because of that, I think they got it right. But I also think that they need to get ahead of this happening again. Like, clearly, as long as this took, there was a lot of conversation about whether it should be granted or not. And I understand that debate. At the beginning of the year, you agree to run every race unless you have an extraordinary circumstance. And at that point, NASCAR will look at it and grant a waiver. Deciding to run another race is, not what this waiver was intended for, as I see it. So I'm not opposed to this decision because I think it would be bad for our fan base for Kyle Larson to not be in it. But I want some more clarity moving forward. I think the clarity was better for the fans, the teams, everybody. If they would have said, look, man, I know it's a bad situation with the rain, but you have to run this Cup race. We have fans that have come here to watch you race. We need to give them that. If you don't run, then we're not going to grant you a waiver. Then they could have made that decision 100% knowing what it was that was involved, and the fans would have known it as well. So I would like to see that, Dustin. I would like just to be a little more clear in something like that, right? An injury you can't talk about before. There are some odd circumstances that you can't talk about before. But if you're going to go do something, plan something prior to, I think that should be public information. A decision should be made, and then you stick with it.
And that's one thing Elton Sawyer talked to us about, is he said there was no waiver granted ahead of time, so there was no decision. So in this instance, what you said couldn't take place because they hadn't gotten to that point, even with the race being delayed at that time. Let me ask you this: one of the questions I asked Elton Sawyer was that should Kyle Larson have been penalized along with being granted a waiver? I mean, at the end of the day, he and the team were saying the Coca-Cola 600 was the priority. It was the priority. And that was everything that they talked about when talking about the double. Would it have made sense to deduct, any playoff points? And one of the things Sawyer told me was, look, everything was on the table as they had these discussions. They did not penalize Larson, just gave him the playoff waiver. Would it have made sense to have had a penalty, or was the penalty enough that he wasn't going to get the points from the Coca-Cola 600, which is the most points in a race that you can get, and losing out on those playoff points already?
Dustin, that's an interesting concept, of having a penalty built around a waiver. I just think for me, I would just rather see the waiver better defined. And I think it's just you either get it or you don't. And again, I'm not opposed to them giving the waiver. I don't like confusion, and I would rather have it cleared up beforehand. As far as a penalty, I can understand the concept of that, and there's some logic to that. At the same token, he didn't run the race, so he didn't get those points. Allgaier drove the car, so Kyle Larson got 0 points. They were all went to because he didn't drive the car. He didn't start the car. So you know, that to me matters. So there was a bit of a penalty there, but I just think you either get a waiver or you don't.
And you talked about it, something that's been talked about in this last week or so as we've been waiting a decision from NASCAR is just the issue of a playoff waiver and how many times it has been given. And look, it's even, as I noticed, it's been given to when drivers have been suspended, which I think I would have a serious issue with it if it really needs to be given in those situations. I guess my question is the playoff waiver even necessary at this point? Why can't we just go back to, hey, you're in the top 36 in points or something like that? And if you've got an injury, so be it. But if you win, even if you miss 6 races because of an injury, that you still get in. Or look, if you want to go run the double and in Indianapolis 500 and it's delayed and you miss the Coca-Cola 600, but you've won a couple races and you're in a position to advance to make the playoffs, why shouldn't it? Why should this have even been an issue that was wasting everybody's time and space? What more can be done with this?
I would be completely against the situation in which a driver that's racing for a cup championship wasn't required to run every race unless there was an extraordinary circumstance. If you're going to run cup, you need to run cup. If you want to run IndyCar, go run IndyCar. If you want to run sports cars, go run. Look, there's nothing wrong with any of it, but I am not a fan of having a system that a driver could say, hey, okay, I know I'm in the playoffs, so now I'm going to go run a particular race that I want to run, or I'm gonna go to the beach. I'm just gonna take the weekend off. Our fans deserve better than that. Our fans deserve to know that their driver that they're paying tickets for are going to be at that race. And so the waiver is look, I love the waiver because I'm telling you, I can count. I don't have enough fingers to count the number of times that I was injured and should not have been in a race car, had no business being in the race car, and it was dangerous. But I did it because I had to do it. And I'm talking about stupid stuff that no one ever knew about because you couldn't tell anybody. And I don't think that's right either. I think that in every other sport, almost every other sport rather, there's a backup guy. If a quarterback goes down, there's another quarterback. He may not be as good, but there's another chance. And in this system, it's very hard to do that because we don't have it's not that type of game. So I like the waiver system. I just want more definition around it. And in this case, I think everybody could have gotten ahead of it and made a decision ahead of time. And I think and look, NASCAR has been really good about looking at their policies and saying, how can we do this better? And I think that'll happen in this case, because I would have been perfectly okay if on Thursday of Indy, NASCAR communicated to Hendrick and to the public, if he decides to not run the Coke 600, he will not get a waiver. But that needed to be said beforehand. That's my opinion. It doesn't mean I'm right, but I just think clarity. But if you're going to run for a cup championship, your focus, you should be required to run every race unless it's an extraordinary circumstance.
You talk about clarity with the waiver moving forward. So give me a sense of what you want to see with it. I know you talk about their extraordinary circumstance. Does running the double and the potential of doing the Indianapolis 500 and the Coca-Cola 600, missing the 600 again, does that fall? Would you allow that moving forward if you were rewriting the rule to provide an exception for the Indianapolis 500? Obviously, there's the potential Kyle Larson could do this again, and even Elton Sawyer said, "Look, we as NASCAR we embrace the double." How would you rewrite it to clarify in a situation like this? And I know you can't come up with every situation because some things are going to be hard to define. But how would you clarify things?
Well, first of all, your 100%, your focus needs to be on Cup if you're going to compete for a Cup championship. And if you have something out of your control that happens, then that's, to me, the reason for the waiver. If there's an injury, obviously, if there's some sort of circumstance that maybe NASCAR needs some time to sort out, it gives an opportunity for a waiver that they can make a better decision by having a little bit of time, right? In the event of choosing one event versus another, you thought that through. You came to a conclusion on that. And so that's something that I think needs to be looked at. Look, I was in Indy for those 2 weeks, and the energy around Kyle Larson was real. It was real. People at the Indianapolis 500 were pulling for Kyle Larson to win the race. They were cheering for him when he did well. They gasped when he didn't. It was a lot of energy around Kyle Larson, and that was good for everybody, including NASCAR. What wasn't good for NASCAR is when Kyle Larson's fans were at the race and he wasn't able to be there. That wasn't good for NASCAR. And it was a really difficult decision for Hendrick to make. I mean, what do you do? There is no right thing to do in that situation. It really isn't. I felt bad for him because you also have to remember the complexity of the Coke 600 may have been rain delayed. There was weather in the area for that too. So it was a very, very difficult decision for them to make. I felt bad for him. You heard it in Kyle Larson's voice. He was very clear about it. And I think it's a chance for all of us to learn, all of us, this entire industry to learn, how can we do this better? And people above me are going to have to make the determination if running the Indy 500 and if a rain condition happens, you're going to miss the 600. Is that good for NASCAR? I'm not so sure that I think it is. I'm not so sure that I believe that. And the reason I say that is because, in my heart, I'm still a competitor. And if I'm committed to run every race, then you should too. And that's just how I feel as a competitor. And what is deemed to be a race that is you should get a waiver for. And again, I think they did the right thing here. I really do. I think this was the right decision. I just think this needs preconceived events like this need a decision made ahead of time so everybody knows what's going to happen, including the fan base.
Well, we do know that Kyle Larson will be racing for a championship now that he does have this playoff waiver, and you'll be able to watch the playoffs on NBC Sports and USA Network. And our coverage begins June 16th when the Cup Series runs its inaugural race at Iowa Speedway coming up.
Hi, I'm Parker Kligerman. For more access like this from Pit Road, be sure to click and subscribe to the Motorsports on NBC YouTube channel.